Okay. We are recording. Okay. What does the face of God look like in the United States today? Yesterday, our country celebrated its birthday. The great experiment got off to a rather dramatic start, built on ideals rather than personalities, like so many countries in Europe at the time. For 244 years, we've been trying to live into those ideals and finding that sometimes our story and our ideals walk different paths. Sometimes we're as brilliant as the fireworks we set off last night. Sometimes we're as dark as the night behind them. And all through it, the story of being a Christian has always been a subplot. It too has been characterized by hiccups and stumbles and great leaps forward. In today's gospel lesson, Jesus says, "To what shall I compare this generation? It is like children playing in the marketplaces saying, 'We played a flute for you and you did not dance. We sang a dirge and you did not mourn.' For John came with a dirge for your sins, and you did not mourn. And the Son of Man comes playing the flute of life, and you will not dance. But wisdom is known by her actions." Maybe bullheaded as they were, the Jews of Jesus' day understood more than they knew. Before we throw them under the bus for being stubborn and recalcitrant, you have to look at what it's like to be stuck between two apparently mutually exclusive choices. Do we dance when we are not happy? Do we mourn when we are not sad? Well, then, what do you do? Maybe it's time to stop and listen. Maybe there's a third way out there. The differences may not be as exclusive as they first appeared. Wisdom is known by her actions. Our country has been caught between two pandemics. COVID-19 has sickened far too many of us and claimed the lives of thousands of Americans and millions around the world. You can't run from it because it's a pandemic. It's everywhere. Social distancing is getting old, and the economy is impoverishing so many of us. The burden of it is almost unbearable. On the other hand, the events of recent weeks has brought to light another pandemic that is centuries old. It's hard to look at in the face because it's so fraught with difficulty. But white people have created a world after their own image and actively and passively kept others out. Maybe it's time to listen. This morning I have with me Maria Lopez, um, Vernon Washington, Mike Kang, Zora Carter, and a woman who grew up with me in Ecuador, Sid Kurtz, who spent many, many years with the Native Americans in Alaska. And the question is a simple one. What does it mean for you to be a Christian in the United States today? From your corner of the world, so to speak, what do you want the world to know about what it means to live as a Christian in today's United States? And Mike, I'll hand it to you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mike Kang. I actually grew up in Hawaii, so I have a different perspective than I guess some of my counterparts that are Asian American that grew up on the mainland. So in Hawaii, it's a little different because it's culturally diverse, where white is would be considered the minority, and all the minorities are kind of the majority. So for me, it was odd, or it was not uncommon for there to be one or two white kids in school with me growing up. My faith background is kind of different too, because in Hawaii, on my mother's side, we were plantation workers, and coming from Japan, there was a strong Buddhist influence. So growing up, to add to the cultural differences, my faith base, we kind of were exposed to both Buddhism and Catholicism, because the two sides of the family were different. So throughout my childhood, I would go on Saturdays to a Buddhist ceremony, and then on Sundays go to a Catholic mass. And then mixed in with that too is just having all these different backgrounds and cultures, and that's kind of how in Hawaii we identify people by what you are. So are you Japanese? Are you Korean? Are you Chinese? Are you Hawaiian? So for me, that perspective is different because we identify by culture, and then within that, by faith, one being Buddhism and Catholicism. So it was off for me when I first came to the mainland to think that that was an issue, where it went from being a majority to once again a minority, and seeing more white and black people. So that was different for me, and asking people what they were was kind of odd. And then, yeah, for some was off-putting, but that's kind of what I was used to. So culture that was different, and then faith-based. At that point, um, it wasn't as deeply rooted, I think, um, in some certain aspects. So for me, it took me to get married and have kids, and then move back to Hawaii again, and then plant my feet in the Episcopal Church, and and that's where when my daughter was born, then I actually became baptized and decided to stand firmly in the Episcopal Church, and that was comfortable to me and it made sense. Um, so that was always odd too, is just going back to Hawaii and then coming back in with a white wife and mixed kids, going back into that culture, and once again, that had no regards. That in Hawaii, because they're so diverse, that wasn't an issue. And but the faith-based thing was, no matter to what Episcopal church I went to, it was diverse, but everybody was always welcoming and welcomed you, and that Christian bond was always strong. And then we moved back to the U.S. mainland, and once again, it came back up again. Hey, you're different. So depending on where we lived, is how my kids were viewed. Sometimes they were considered Asian or Southeast Asian or Mexican or Indian because this had that different look, and so that was kind of odd to me. But the one thing, as far as being a Christian and being faith-based, when we went back to Issaquah, was that the Episcopal Church was strong in welcoming in with the love of Christ and bringing faith to the community. But at times, I think culturally it was difficult for people to gain that perspective of how you identified, and some of the traditions that we even do this day are deeply rooted in my Japanese ancestry, where we would make rice cakes every year for New Year's, or my Korean background where we make dumplings every year for New Year's as a cultural thing, which is so different than what we do in Christianity, where it's based on that Christian calendar. So that's kind of where at times for my family and my kids that we get drawn in different directions based on our culture and being Asian American, and then having our Christian based traditions as well. So that's kind of where you kind of diverge, but then it all comes back together, and you have to kind of blend the two together to maintain both your cultural identity and then also maintain your faith-based identity as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
So,
wow.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, Mariali, how do you answer that question? What's it like for you to live as a Christian from where you are in the world today? And I noticed that the flag behind you.
Oh, yeah, this is my flag. I got it, I think, like 2 or 3 years ago. That I don't know. It's practically me, because I feel like I see like the flags. Some people have like just the Mexican flag, and other people, and like they can choose whatever flag. But I don't know. It's like a thing, I guess, in my culture to like, because yeah, I guess yeah, people like my age, I guess, we have like a lot of flags that like represent like where we're from or anything. And when I was getting my flag, I was just like, well, this one, I saw this one, I was like, this is me, because I was born in the US, but like I'm Mexican, like my parents are Mexican, like I have all my family over there. So I was like, this fits me. Yeah. So I don't know, it's just in my room, I guess. Yeah. But I guess for the question, I guess it is a difficult question, but I don't know, for me right now, like especially with everything going on, it's just like, how to say it, I guess being able to, what was I gonna say? Like, I guess, yeah, with everything that's happening right now, and like my religion and everything, and how I grew up viewing the world, and like as an Episcopalian, like, and the church, because I've been there since like I was a little kid, so that's how I grew up. But so I guess just being able to like not well, because I see a lot of division right now with like people hating on another person, like especially like black people right now. And it's just like growing up and like being Christian, I learned to love everyone, no matter like who they are or what, like nothing, just like they are a person. And then just right now, I guess some people are using religion to be like, well, I can't support this person because of this, or I can't support that person because of the other thing. And for me, it's just like kind of letting them know what I learned growing up and like how everything that like going to church taught me and like my faith and everything and what I believe in and like um I don't know if that's making sense. It's like but yeah, I guess for me it does mean like being able to show people that God like created us as what he thought was beautiful, no matter like even though other people are saying that this person should like they're not right or whatever. And yeah, I don't know if that's making sense.
Sure, it is. It sounds like you're talking about it's more your faith has taught you to accept people for who they are,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
yeah, not for the labels we put
basically.
on them. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's a common thing with Mike and at the church in Issaquah was open. Yet there were differences, and yet there was that kind of openness.
Hmm. Yeah, and I guess just also because in my Mexican culture, there's a lot of like a lot of like racism too, because like in Mexico, there's like so so like me, I'm like a darker Mexican, but there's also lighter Mexicans, and I guess in my like in Mexico, there's a lot of division too, because not a lot of people know that because, but like especially now, um, people who are like on the side of the lighter Mexicans, they're also using like religion or things like that to kind of like put us, the darker Mexicans, like down, and it's like, uh, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah,
that
there's
is
like a lot
true.
of things
Where I grew up
going
in
on,
Ecuador, that
and
same sort
yeah,
of lighter colored
yeah,
Ecuadorians tended to look down on
hmm,
darker colored Ecuadorians.
yeah, yeah. So
Let me read what my friend Sid Kurtz wrote. I
okay,
wrote, the question is this: what is it like to live as a Christian and a Native American in today's United States? And she writes, that's a good one. And of course, every person's experience is different. I would say that there is a complex relationship there. When Christianity was introduced, for example, in my home village, it came with prohibiting things like traditional dances and pressure to send kids out of state for education, which was just disastrous. Lots of abuse and punishment for speaking native languages. The dance is back in my village, but not in every village, and some native believers are still convinced it is sinful, of course, in a lot of areas. Missionaries brought disease and virtual enslavement. It made people ashamed of their traditions and history, to the extent that many converts attempted to erase their past. There has also been a backlash effort there where a lot of second and third generation Christians reject the church and push for a return to native spiritualism. There is also a young core group in Alaska who see Christianity as a solution to rampant problems like alcoholism, suicide, and violence. They're actively forming groups that celebrate native foods and history and values while demonstrating the salvific value of an imported religion. And in my particular home village, there is a gratitude for the parochial high school that taught local and boarded kids from the region for almost 30 years and instilled strong values of love. But of course, it's complicated. Many reject their teachings because there was no there were so few native teachers. 3, I think, in all these years. The overall word is complicated. She says, I highly recommend Native by Caitlin Curtis, which addresses these issues. Well, it's Mike. You have to go in 3 minutes, and we've been on the air now for
I do
almost.
it.
But thank you so much. I will have to see what our other friends have to say when they
Okay.
show up. But thank you so much for both of you. I won't keep you any
And
longer.
I would chime in.
Go ahead.
Well, I would chime in one last little thing that your friend from Sid mentioned, that the missionaries came in, or white people came in, and that was the same experience in Hawaii, where the missionaries came in, and the people of Hawaii, whether you're Hawaiian or other races, had to strip down, and the traditions that they had to go away, and there was just one way of being a Christian at that time. You had the missionaries that were very strict and wanted you to convert everything to a certain way. So learning that history, that's why I was so late into coming into the Episcopal Church, because seeing that dichotomy between the old school Catholic or missionaries and then the Buddhism was confusing at 1st. And it took some time to look at the Episcopal Church and see how open and loving it was. And to Marielle's point too, even within the Asian culture, so everybody says Asian American, but if you're like me, I identify as being Korean or Japanese. So that broad moniker that we put on all Asian Americans, if you're Asian, that really says they're Asian. They say, I'm Japanese, I'm Chinese, I'm Vietnamese, I'm Thai. So that's one thing that the labeling comes into play again. When we talk about that bias or that discrimination, that's a label that was put on everybody. Same with like in Mexico, I'm sure you have different regions and you have indigenous people that were living in Mexico, and I don't think they necessarily identify as just black Mexicans. And that's kind of where growing up with the race and the culture is different, because labels have been placed and have been accepted for years. But if you look at the people that are labeled that, that's not necessarily how they identify themselves.
Right. Yeah.
So just making that point. So, but thanks for having me.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I'll go ahead and let the two of you go, and I'm going to stay on just a little bit longer to see if my other friends come on. But in the meantime, thank you so much. And this will be the sermon for St. Paul's on a Sunday.
Okay.
So, bye-bye.
All right. Hopefully it's good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.